Today on the show, a dramatic break in the case. After an intense 2-day manhunt, police say they've captured the man who assassinated Charlie Kirk. Law enforcement officials named Tyler Robinson on Friday as the alleged assassin of Kirk, the 31-year-old conservative influencer and ally of Donald Trump who was shot and killed during an event at Utah Valley University on Wednesday. First, President Trump announced the arrest of a suspect in an appearance on Fox News earlier today.
I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor.
Later, at a press conference, law enforcement officials said Robinson was turned into police by his father.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident.
Robinson is from Washington, Utah. That's a city about 260 miles southwest of Orem, where Kirk was killed. Officials have not yet released a motive for the shooting, although they said Robinson had become more political in recent years. He had reportedly talked about disliking Kirk at a recent dinner with family, where he mentioned the conservative was coming to speak to Utah. Surveillance video showed the suspect arriving near the Utah Valley University campus in a Dodge Challenger on Wednesday morning, about 4 hours before Kirk was shot dead. Authorities in this news conference have described extensive evidence that they say ties the suspect in custody to the shooting of Kirk, including statements to relatives suggesting that he committed the crime, social media messages, and physical evidence. Robinson's arrest comes after a manhunt that stretched over a day and a half, with officials previously offering a reward for $100,000 for information leading to his capture. Today, as Charlie Kirk's killer is unmasked, inside the manhunt for his assassin. I'll be speaking with my colleague Tom Leonard, who has written for the Daily Mail today about the wider threat of political violence in the U.S. For the Daily Mail, this is The Assassination of Charlie Kirk. I'm Germania Poleo. So today I'm going to be talking with Tom Leonard. He's a legendary features writer for the Daily Mail. Hello, Mr. Leonard. I mean, if you want to introduce yourself to our audience before we get going.
I'm a legendary features writer for the Daily Mail. No, yes, I have been in, I am one of the more longer serving British correspondents out in the US. I've been out there for about, all told, about 19 years now. As you based in New York and, as you say, writing features rather than straight news reporting.
So let's get right down to it. We just saw the FBI and local officials in Utah tell the public, we got him. They have the man who they believe killed the conservative commentator Charlie Kirk on Wednesday. I know you were watching just like we were here in the newsroom. We now know the suspect is a 22-year-old man from Utah who apparently had expressed a dislike for Charlie Kirk and his politics. Mr. Leonard, what do you think of the profile of the suspect? Are you surprised? Is there anything you didn't expect?
No, I mean, I think we'd have to make the caveat, we don't know everything yet. For example, Governor Cox of Utah did stress that they don't know yet if he was mentally ill in any way, and that can be an issue. Sometimes people have rushed to judgment on the motives for some of these killers and have assumed that they are purely politically motivated, and then mental illness has raised its head as an issue. Certainly, I wasn't surprised to find out that this suspect, didn't like Charlie Kirk's politics. That's no surprise. There are increasing, and that he'd been increasingly radicalized, shall we say, online, and he'd expressed increasing hatred for Kirk to family members. That's one of the things that came out of it. But I mean, there are common factors now. It's just like school shooters who copy each other. You seem to have political assassins now who copy each other. And so you've got things like writing messages on the bullet casings, which has been a feature of Luigi Mangione did it last year when he shot a health industry executive in Manhattan. And so in terms of the clearest indications we seem to have of where the killer was coming from with Charlie Kirk were written on these bullets. Take, what was it about fascist, I think was the most obvious one, suggesting that he's coming at Kirk from a kind of left-wing stance. That's no surprise. I don't think anyone's particularly surprised by that.
I want to talk about these similarities to other shooters, whether it's political or school shooters, as you mentioned, because you've covered all of this. Officials said they found the suspect talking about this or discussing what he was going to do on Discord. This is a social media platform that we have seen involved in previous situations like this one. And again, a young man who's of college age. What's going on in this country with this profile of young men?
I think that's right. I think there's a radicalization. I think the governor hit the nail on the head when he talked about the role of social media and urged people to stop using it. I think that's an accelerant of this radicalization process. You're getting people, and Discord is another platform that gets used in these things for these discussions. Social media is kind of both isolating in the sense that it can trap people and send them down rabbit holes of increasing extremism in their views. We don't know yet exactly what's happened with this suspect and why he came to hate Charlie Kirk so much that he wanted to kill him. But, Charlie Kirk was very vociferous and very provocative. So it's possibly no surprise that he was a target.
So last night, it's been very interesting how the updates have been coming out. President Trump has been the one to announce that Charlie Kirk had died. And also it was him who on Fox News this morning announced there had been an arrest. Now, last night, I saw the press conference with the FBI and local officials, and they really appeared to not know much. A local official admitted they had no idea who the suspect was. And it appears that it was once they released those additional images that relatives of the suspect turned him in. What do you think of the FBI's role in this? It seems kind of notable that as of last night, they seemed to have no idea and were begging the public for help.
Yes, they were under pressure, weren't they? And there have been a couple of false alarms where suspects had been announced and then it turned out that they weren't. And I think, you could see the relief on Kash Patel's face today as he announced that they had this suspect, and they seem to be, on this occasion, fairly sure they have their man. These investigations are always they're tricky because it does take time. It takes time. In this particular case, this man was wearing very distinctive. Some of the clothes he was wearing were very distinctive, particularly the T-shirt, and it often takes time for someone else, a family member, to recognise it. Now, we've heard slightly different reports of how this came out, but certainly it appears that he discussed it with family members, and it also appears that his father is reportedly a police officer, and he was involved in the decision for the suspect to come forward. So, I mean, it's. There's often a time lag. I mean, if you remember what happened with Luigi Mangione in Manhattan, people were kind of, almost suggesting he was a ninja. The way he managed to just escape. He shot this executive in the middle of Manhattan, and just disappeared. But then afterwards, it all became quite slightly clear. A CCTV camera. I'm always surprised that Americans have not had as much CCTV exposure as people in Britain and in Europe have. And I think a lot of Americans, often including criminals, don't realise quite how much of what they do is captured on CCTV. It does take time for CCTV footage to be analysed. I think we did have. I think it was slow because we had that very early footage of the face or the figure on the rooftop, so they could have found that CCTV footage quite clearly. Yeah.
As you said, it's another similarity to the Luigi Mangione case. But I want to go back to the writings on the casings, because we all remember when the Luigi Mangione case was in the news that he was getting praised as a hero. And it seemed that his motive was to start some sort of revolution. Did he? Are we now going to start seeing, I mean, even the way he was dressed, the way he was caught, the casings, the assassination style, quickly in and out. Is this a pattern that we're going to start seeing in this country?
One wonders, certainly you see patterns, coming back to what we said about school shooters, there were certainly patterns there, and they emulate each other. So we had a shooting very recently in Minneapolis in a Catholic church, and two children died, and the Robin Westman, who was responsible, I don't know if you remember this, he said online, how much he admired Adam Lanza, who was the Sandy Hook shooter in 2012, who killed 26 people. He also shot children, targeted children. They had similar techniques, they had similar targets, and I think there is a copycat mentality to this. Beyond the fact that, say, yes, you'll probably want to wear dark clothing if you're involved in this kind of thing, or possibly that you'll become less obvious if you wear bright clothing. Something like that's fairly obvious, I would have thought, to anyone planning a shooting. But yeah, in that sense, it was obviously planned. He made a quick getaway. He dumped his gun in a wooded area, which is exactly what Luigi Mangione did. And Mangione, of course, as we just discussed, he'd written messages on his bullet casings. And in that respect, it was similar.
I wanted to also put two things by you. There's a lot of discussion online about whether the shot that killed Charlie Kirk had to be done by a professional because it was one and done. Other people are saying, actually, no, he missed. It was not a good shot. Now we know that it was just a young guy, though we have seen images of him on social media with guns. What do you think of all that debate? And also that ties into the similarities between this and the attempted hit on Donald Trump. Also, someone with a rifle from a nearby building to one of these political events. So is this going to change how politicians present themselves? I mean, what about the surrounding rooftops? It seems that is a weak spot for politicians who are controversial and out there spreading their message. And also, of course, Charlie wasn't a politician, just, pundits, commentators, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on various things there. I mean, coming to that last point, certainly Charlie didn't get the protection that a politician would have got. He doesn't get any kind of Secret Service detail or police protection. And I understand that people who were there at the university campus at the time were quite surprised by how little security there was there, considering the profile of the speaker. I think also the issue with rooftop shootings, I mean, certainly there was a communication failure with the shooting of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania last year. You had a problem where you had the Secret Service who were guarding the inner perimeter around him, and then you had different local police forces guarding the outer bit, and the shooter was spotted there. And my memory of this, the message that there was a suspicious person on a roof didn't get back to the Secret Service in time. So that was, you could say, I know. I mean, it's here we go, another man on a roof, and it was allowed to happen. That's certainly right. There is always this rush that there's a professional involved. If the killer isn't caught immediately, if it's a very straightforward killing that involves just, a bullet that no misses, people assume, it's some kind of, Dare the Jackal style killer. And then, as you say, it turns out that they're not. It turns out that he wasn't that far away. What is it, 150 yards? It seems to be an estimate I commonly read, with a scope on a bolt-action rifle. That's not a particularly difficult... And a man who's sitting down, so not moving much. My understanding is that would not be too difficult as a shot. And, of course, I think in America, so many people shoot now. It's not like in Europe, where it's very unlikely you'll find someone who is a target shooter. So many Americans are pretty skilled at shooting. So I wasn't surprised by that, but I'm always a bit skeptical now when people say, it's the hallmarks of a professional, because, as you say, too many times, Mangione, the shooting in Pennsylvania, those were both cases where they said, it's a professional shooter, and then it turned out they were nothing but. I mean, this particular man, I think he wore some very distinctive clothing. I know he changed his clothing and then he changed it back again, but he wore very distinctive clothing, which people will recognise. The T-shirt he wore, I thought, well, there's got to be someone who's seen that T-shirt before. I mean, that's not a professional killer would not do that, I'm sure. And he wore quite distinctive shoes as well. So those are the kind of things that I would have thought most people would say, that doesn't smack of a professional hitman.
So what happens next in this investigation? I mean, we've seen similar ones before. We know the suspect is still to be charged. We're going to know more about his motive. But I want you to kind of walk us through what that process will be like, and also how it will affect the American media and political landscape. We have seen Trump speaking about this a lot. How long is he going to continue focusing on this, and will Charlie Kirk's movement become even greater than it was because of this?
In terms of the investigation, I'm sure, the next thing they will obviously need to find, once they've gathered all the evidence that does look quite considerable against him, is a motive, and they will be poring through his computer and his phone, and it sounds like they have some evidence already. I was quite struck in the press conference when they were talking about how he'd sent these messages on Discord, about messages like retrieving a rifle from a drop-off point, wrapped in a towel, which suggested to me and to others that there's someone else involved. I mean, who's he sending?
Right.
Like that
I was
to?
wondering that when I heard that, but officials did not make that clear. But that is the impression I got when I'm like, they said police, the roommate allowed police to look at his computer that was open on Discord, and he was outlining what he was doing. So yes, is there the possibility he was saying this to someone?
Or the possibility, is that, of course, that the alternative is that he was saying it to someone who has helped police with the inquiry, which is why they are not going to investigate that person. That's another possibility as well. And that the source of, one of the people who turned this man in was the person who was sent those messages. So obviously, in terms of, that the motive will be the next issue. How did he get hold of the gun? Did someone else supply him with the gun and the ammunition? Who else knew about it on the way? I think those are the obvious things that they will need to investigate. In terms of its kind of wider ramifications of it, I was struck by Governor Spencer Cox, and he was asked if it was a watershed moment. And I think his response was really interesting, because he said, he said it may be, but is it the end of a dark chapter in American history, or the beginning? Is this the moment when America finally grapples with the issue, the growing issue of political violence, or is it the moment when it all gets really unravels and starts to get really serious? And I think, we've had they were made in the press conference today, the comparisons with the 1960s. And, there were there's a lot of similarities there. It was a time of huge social upheaval and real polarization in society, and a lot of political assassinations, including of two Kennedys, various civil rights leaders in the 1960s. And I think that is an obvious parallel that you can make with the moment now. And I suppose the issue now, I suppose, with Kirk is, does this set off further violence, or will this be the moment when America finally tries to... the signs are not good of them doing it. You had Donald Trump on one side rushing to judgment, saying, even before they'd found a suspect, blaming the radical left. And you had people like Elizabeth Warren saying, oh, how do you expect us to, dial down the rhetoric when Donald Trump says this and Donald Trump says that, which is maybe a fair point, but it's possibly not the right kind of thing to be saying at the moment when you're trying and lower the temperature, which it certainly needs to be done. I don't see much sign of it. I mean, personally, as a British person who's lived in America for so long, the huge elephant in the room is guns, the free availability of guns. Well, when Americans, say, oh, why do we have all this violence and political violence, and it doesn't exist in other countries, well, certainly not Western countries, you just say, well, you've got a very, very, huge number of guns, and they're so easy to get hold of. And that's what sets America apart. Grasping that nettle, I think, is probably unlikely.
We have several major issues in this country that are being blamed for this assassination. Some are blaming guns, some are blaming polarization, some are blaming the internet, some are blaming the left, some are blaming the right. So what do you think really is the basis for this type of problem that we keep happening? And is the blame game going to keep going and just get worse and just continue feeding into the cycle of political violence?
Yeah, I think I think it's a combination of factors, and you outlined all the factors that are responsible. It's not all one thing. I think social media and the polarization, the fact that we've just got two political parties that are hugely different. Recent polls have shown that people in voting both on the Republicans and Democrats, when they vote at elections now, they feel that they're voting for something far more fundamental than just different policies. That the outcome of the election will decide their way of life against someone else's way of life. And I think the parties have gone so far apart. I mean, even since when I arrived in America in kind of like 2005, and the difference, there was so much more common ground between the Democrats and the Republicans. So I think that is an issue. I think the polarization is a huge factor in America, and it is happening in other countries as well. But I don't think anything like to the same extent. And then also, as you say, social media is kind of turbocharging it. It's fueling it. It's making, it is just making the anger and the venom so much sharper. And then finally, as you say, the guns themselves, the availability of guns means that the people who want to do something, who feel that, experts will tell you on political violence was that people tend to turn to political violence when they feel that conventional politics is not getting them what they want. And so what we've had here is increasingly people feeling they're not being heard, and they want to make a statement that is going to get noticed. And of course, guns will, the easy availability of guns, you suddenly get some person who spends his whole, nerdy type who spends his whole time on his computer and social media and video games or whatever. I'm just thinking of some of the school shooters we've had. They get hold of a gun, suddenly they're powerful, and they're someone who has to be taken notice of. So, I think that's the power of the gun in a nutshell, isn't it? And the devastating potential it has. and as it showed with Charlie Kirk.
How do you see the Trump administration taking on the Charlie Kirk assassination to continue their work and promote their policies? Like, we have already seen Department of State officials say that any foreigner who said anything or that sounded like celebrating Charlie Kirk's death would not be allowed to the country, would get their visas removed. That gets us into the other issue of the far left saying horrible things about Charlie Kirk after his death. But do you think this is going to radicalize both, I guess, the right and the left?
Yeah, I think it will more. I think Charlie Kirk was certainly an icon to a lot of young conservatives, and I think they will take his killing far more personally than say the killing of a senator or a representative. I think he was their man, and I think in that sense, I think it'll sharpen the tension. I think every killing inevitably ratchets up the polarization.
Is there any coming back from this level of polarization? I mean, you kind of said before that your inclination is that we are just starting the bad times. But what could, President Trump and also the Democrats in leadership positions do to cool the situation, to try to move in the right direction after this?
Well, I think you've got to be, I don't know. I mean, the things that they could do are the things I'm pretty sure that I know they won't do. I mean, there may be things that are impossible to do, like, as the governor of Utah said today, to try and encourage young people to come off social media. That is where so much of this problem is fueled, and it's the kind of that's the crucible for it. And gun ownership, gun availability. We don't yet know how the suspect got hold of this gun. We don't know whether he bought it himself, or he got it from a family member or whatever. But certainly some shooters have, political shooters and other shooters, mass shooters, have been shown signs of mental illness, and they've still been able to get hold of guns somehow. So I think that we're talking, it's a crack record going on about this and trying to stop people getting hold of. I mean, this man had a single shot rifle. I mean, he had a bolt action rifle, so he didn't have one of those, AK style, assault rifles. So that's not an issue there. But we're going to get into the same old issues of availability of guns, checks that are made. Is it easy to do? I'm not entirely sure. My understanding is Utah is a pretty easy place to get hold of guns.
It's interesting because even the what to do about it shows the country's polarization. You have AOC outside Congress saying this is why we need to pass gun reform, and then you have Nancy May saying this is how the left-wing crazies kill right-wing people, and then you have another one saying it's because he was mentally ill. So that alone doesn't give us much hope because everyone is sort of on a different playing field. But I also wanted to get your thoughts because it's not just political violence in this country that we have been paying attention to. Before Charlie Kirk was killed, he had been focused on the murder of the Ukrainian refugee on a North Carolina train by a career criminal who was mentally ill and was released awaiting trial. That kind of shows the other side of the violence Americans are very aware of. Can you tell us how these two filmed murders that also I keep thinking, is it okay for humanity that every time I go on Twitter, I see either of these videos, the graphic version? What is this doing to us as a country? Both hearing about these horrific cases, having them filmed, and then just over and over watching this. I mean, are we going to get, used to this type of thing?
Yeah, I think you're right. And that, again, the governor, who I think made some very good points in his press conference today, alluded to this as well. It is digital media have turned these kind of things into a spectator sport, particularly as in the case of the Ukrainian woman who was killed, that was CCTV on a train in Charlotte, North Carolina, and again this was CCTV. But you also have so many just videos that have been filmed by people who were there on the spot of crimes, and it does have a kind of brutalizing effect on people, I think, and it habituates people to seeing these things. I think it's really quite disturbing. One of the disturbing details of Charlie Kirk's killing was how quickly the full video of him being killed went viral online. And I mean, that's people, as you could see, a lot of people were cheering his death. And I think that explains why a lot of these people were sharing it online. And that's deeply depressing. And there was an awful lot of the reaction was, well, he had it coming. You know, people were gleefully pulling out this quote from, I think, 2023, when he said, you know, we've got to put up with a few people being killed each year to protect gun rights. You know, it's obviously that was one of the biggest ironies of this whole tragedy.
Yeah. And just to close off, I want to go back to, you kind of talked about it, but a lot of people have been mentioning it. Are we going to go through a decade that was similar to the 60s? But given all the things we just discussed, the internet, more weapons, maybe not more polarization, it seems to me we would be way worse off than in the 60s, no?
I think you're right. I think other people have made that point, saying that actually in the 60s the country was a lot more cohesive than it is now, that there was still a lot of shared perceptions about America, a lot of a shared identity that increasingly doesn't exist at the, you know, in the current America. So I think you're right in saying that it could be so much worse, and I think there's, as you say, social media has made these shootings, both as in the sense it's made a kind of spectacle that encourages people to do it as well. I mean, I think, you know, when we look at one last thing is we look at the motivation of people. I think people have various motives for doing these shootings, and it's not always one thing. It's not always political radicalization. This has come out in various shootings. It's sometimes they love the attention. They've got a craving for attention, as well as making a political point. And I think things like social media do fuel that, and they facilitate that. And we didn't have that in the 1960s. I think you're completely right there, that it could be much worse now.
Well, I'm going to leave our listeners with that terrifying thought. Thank you so much, Tom Leonard, for speaking with me today about the events of this week.
Good. Thank you. Good to talk to you.